Hello, you wonderful people. So yesterday, at the time of me recording this, the final episode of WandaVision aired. So I figured I wanted to take this video to kind of share some thoughts and theories I have about potentially where Wanda's story could go from here. Obviously, this is going to involve me talking about spoilers from WandaVision, definitely stuff from the finale. So if you've not seen the finale, if you haven't seen WandaVision altogether, do not watch this. I don't want to spoil anything for you. You have been warned. So let's get to it then. Obviously, there's a lot to kind of take away from that finale and potentially what it can mean going forward for Wanda. Obviously, I have my thoughts about it. I discussed them kind of throughout everything I was kind of thinking at the time during my review, but obviously subsequently I've heard a couple people share their thoughts about certain aspects of the episode and stuff like that, so I'm kind of building off of some of that as well. But I think the interesting thing going forward is the big question a lot of people had is Wanda going to become the next villain? Now, whether it's just going to be the next villain for a little bit, you know, maybe even up to Doctor Strange 2 into the Multiverse of Madness, or whether she becomes the next Avengers level threat. Those are the big questions. And I think at the end of this series, it's unclear where Wanda's going to toe that line, because I think people have said that in the comic book she has kind of toed that line, or maybe she even has gone full-blown villain to a certain extent in the series. I'm not quite sure. I'm not the most comic book knowledgeable person, but this potentially sets her up to be someone that she could toe that line, or maybe, like I said, in Doctor Strange, to become the straight up villain, because that's what I was kind of thinking, that maybe that's where her route was going to take her, that she would become the villain. But where things stand, it might be, my other thought was maybe she helps Doctor Strange. Because the thought was maybe whatever happens at the end of WandaVision, he has to step in to help, like, fix something that Wanda broke. To be fair, everything's kind of returned to normal. We'll kind of get to that later, but it's like everything seems normal-ish, so there's not necessarily for Doctor Strange to step in, but it could be, maybe it's a situation when we do pick up with Wanda again, she's practicing more of the stuff from the Darkhold, trying to get her powers under control, and her now being the Scarlet Witch, and what Agatha's saying, that the Scarlet Witch will be the end of the world, will bring about, you know, will end the world. So maybe at one point her powers go too wild, and that's when Doctor Strange has to step in to stop her. So she might be playing the villain role in that, or maybe, like I said, they have to join forces for something even greater. Because there's also the conversation about Mordo is out there taking out other sorcerers. He kind of has been the entire time. So does that mean he's eventually going to cross paths with Wanda, and that's what's going to set her off? That might, like, him coming after her triggers the Scarlet Witch in her, and she loses control. Because the conversation is all, you know, the whole old adage of absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you don't get no more absolute than the Scarlet Witch, when we even have Agatha saying that the Scarlet Witch is even stronger than the Sorcerer Supreme. I mean, when you think about that, Wanda was already able to go toe-to-toe with Thanos already, and now you're adding more power to that. Freaking Doctor Strange could go toe-to-toe with Thanos, even when he was using Infinity Stones. So for her to be that much stronger too, that's a scary thing. So that's why it could be interesting if they are setting her up. Because currently where things are, I'd say she is the most powerful person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we're aware of. Not including the Eternals, because we don't know where they stand power level wise as well in comparison to her. So, but currently where things are that we're knowledgeable and aware of, it seems like she's top tier right now. What I thought was kind of an interesting thing is something else Agatha said about how the Scarlet Witch isn't born, she's forged. And it's kind of interesting, and this kind of goes in line with what I was wondering about, because obviously the whole conversation has been that, you know, the whole conversation outside and within the show of labeling Wanda as the villain, because obviously she technically was the villain of the show to a certain extent, because she was the one responsible for all this, because it makes you think, oh, who's doing this to you, Wanda? But obviously it turns out no one was. She kind of did it herself. Her grief got the best of her, and her powers kicked into overdrive, and she started everything. So obviously you even had Monica say that line of, don't let them make you into the villain, and she says, what if I already am? So it makes you almost feel like maybe everything was predetermined, that sadly it was that fate can't be changed, that basically the course she was set on from the moment she was born, that she was always going to be a villain. It just took the right steps, that, you know, because Agatha's saying, like, oh, you have no idea what you're doing, what you've done, kind of implying that, hey, maybe she released something by becoming the Scarlet Witch. Maybe, like, first I was wondering, like, maybe it released something out out there in the world, but it might just be simply, and this is my other thought, was just simply by her becoming the Scarlet Witch, this scourge that will probably end the world, just by becoming it, you know, you as inexperienced as you are when it comes to all this magic stuff, you just forging the Scarlet Witch will be the end of us all. Which I think the irony behind that is, obviously Agatha was trying to steal her powers, but I think Agatha was one of the necessary ingredients. Because remember, the thing with Agatha's backstory is, like, obviously her mother and their coven was like, she's like, I can be good, and it was like, no, you can't. So I think that's interesting how, like, the puck kind of gets passed on to Wanda in a certain extent, where it's like her being like, oh, you're this and that, but Wanda's like, no one gets to tell me who and what I am. But it's like, I think ironically enough, it kind of came full circle in that regard. So it's almost like, I think Agatha ended up incidentally pushing her closer to the route of like doing everything that she did, coming after her, wanting her powers and everything, being so power obsessed, ended up pushing Wanda down that path even further, and even potentially playing a role, because obviously when Wanda's taking back the powers that Agatha took from her, as well as Agatha's powers, it makes you wonder, did she take a little bit of Agatha's darkness as well? Because that was kind of Agatha's whole thing, was stealing powers. So for Wanda to kind of turn that against her too, it makes you wonder, like, did Wanda kind of take a little bit of that seed of darkness with her, or was it always there as the Scarlet Witch? Or maybe that seed of darkness has been feeding off all the terrible things that she's gone through, whether it be, you know, as we saw in WandaVision, obviously us getting to see that scene with her and Pietro with the Stark bomb, or joining with Hydra, you know, the whole Ultron thing, or, you know, Civil War, where she got blamed. I mean, her being the literal reason why the Accords are a thing now. Plus now with Westview, like, maybe all of that kind of takes its toll on her psyche, all that pain, all that grief, and it's eventually like spouting, like there's a little seed that's been growing more and more, and that seed being the Scarlet Witch, to the point that, you know, that power is too much for her to control. Like I said, whether she ends up actually reigning in it, or whether she ends up getting consumed by it, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Because some people were wondering too about that final post-credit scene of, you know, her hearing her children. For some people, and I can understand where people are coming from with this, where they feel like it's a little backpedaling because she finally got past the grief of, you know, giving up Vision as well as her kids, and for her to kind of backpedal, and it seems like, oh, you're reading the Darkhold, so maybe it's a thing of, oh, are you going to try and bring your kids back and make them real now? So that begs that question, and that could be setting things in motion, but it's like, for them, it's like you progress as a character, now you're backpedaling a little bit. Now, once again, even the people I've heard said, even they don't know that's where they're feeling right now, because at the end of the day, none of us know fully what that means, because it could just be, the fact is that that's the part of her trying to, her humanity, trying to hold on. It could be a thing of, like, she's steeping further and further into darkness, but the voices of her children calling out to her could be them trying to pull her back. But it just could be like she's so entranced by the power that it's just like no voices can reach her now. Maybe that's what that means. Maybe it is the former and not what I brought up. Once again, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But it's also interesting too that she's like out and about doing her thing, but she's also astral projecting. I didn't realize this until someone else had pointed it out, that obviously Doctor Strange did a very similar thing, except his looked a little more corporeal than her, like, astral projection. Hers looked a little bit more solid. We don't know. Maybe that's a byproduct of showing, like, hey, like, she is the stronger than the Sorcerer Supreme. I mean, to be fair, at that time he wasn't even the Sorcerer Supreme yet. So, like, you know, so, but maybe like what her form looks like could solidify, like, you know, that because she's that much more powerful, her astral projection has more power. So, but like I said, like, what's interesting about that is, like, the question is she actually doing that on purpose? Like, you know, it could be like, oh, she's doing that on purpose, or it could be that's happening without her control. Maybe, you know, either way, I'm probably reading too much into it, but I just think it's a kind of a fascinating thought about the whole situation. So another thing I think is really interesting that kind of could potentially feed into not just Wanda, but necessarily like Wanda herself as a character, but also feeding into what the public's going to think about her, is a criticism I've heard people bring up, and this is a criticism I can understand why people might feel this way, is they feel like Wanda kind of got away with everything, like she's not suffering the consequences, which I commented on this saying that I believe it's going to happen later on down the road. Like, really quickly, like, For some people, it's like she got to just bounce. To be fair, it's like there's no one there to stop her. No one in Westview's going to try and stop her after seeing what she's done to them, plus what she's capable of now. And then on top of that, you add in like, well, Hayward's people were taking out. The only people there are the FBI. Like, how much are they aware of what's going on? Because Jimmy and Monica might have smoothed over a lot of that, because Jimmy and Monica are super sympathetic. Monica, more so than anybody, is sympathetic and understanding what happened with Wanda. Yes, she kidnapped people. Granted, she didn't kill anybody, so I'm sure that kind of eases things over a little bit. It doesn't make it any better, but it's not as bad as things could have been. Granted, she still held an entire town hostage, essentially. So I'm sure they were able to kind of smooth things over, because I'm sure even from Jimmy's perspective, it's thinking of like, yeah, she's one of the Avengers. She helped save the universe from Thanos. So like, we're not going to hold too much of a grudge with her against her. So we're going to let her slide this time. But to me, that doesn't mean that the entire world will, because I'm thinking the residents from Westview, not unless the government shuts it down and makes it so none of what went down there gets exposed, because it would also be acknowledging all the stuff that Hayward did. So it's like, no, we're not, none of that happened, because we don't want to look bad because of the whole Hayward thing. But it could just as easily be a thing that if that does get out there, this could be the public's view of Wanda negative, especially to add in Age of Ultron, you being part of Hydra, all the stuff that Hayward was throwing in their faces, the reason why the Accords got started in Civil War, like all of that, if you add all that with what went down in Westview, there's definitely going to be a potential like vilifying of Wanda in the public eye. Very similar to Spider-Man, obviously, where he stands. Granted, his circumstances were he was framed for like being responsible for killing Mysterio and all this, and obviously he's outed as Peter Parker. Wanda's situation was an accident, kind of brought about on herself, like I said, accidentally, but obviously, you know, it's kind of interesting that you have two Avengers on kind of on the run, essentially, because I think that's more so why she's hiding in the cabin, not just to get away from everybody, maybe, but it might be at that point in time it's kind of public knowledge, like, oh, be on the lookout for Wanda. I mean, who knows, they might potentially set this up that some of the other Avengers, because it's like, where do they all currently stand with this? It's like, oh, we might have to go after Wanda. Like I said, if the government decides to go public with what went down in Westview, because I feel like acknowledging any of that would look bad on them just because of the whole Hayward thing. You know, like I said, it could be reading too much into it, but the reason why I was saying this could tie in, because the way people view Wanda could definitely lead to her becoming more villainous too, because like maybe it's just kind of like, oh, this is how people see me, like, because she already felt that when she was leaving Westview, like that walk, what people are literally labeling a walk of shame, where the entire town is scowling at her, where it's like, yes, it was an accident. And even, you know, some people are like, oh, Monica's just letting her off, but it's like, Monica says, if they knew what you sacrificed, it's like, but what does Wanda say? It's like, it's something of the nature of, I don't want them to know what I sacrificed, because it's like she's accepting how they feel. It's like, no, despite how I felt and what I did, they deserve to feel like there shouldn't be anything added to this to try and change their mind. They're entitled to feel the way they do. So it seemed like Wanda was accepting responsibility. Like, they want to hate me, I'm not going to try and change their mind. I don't deserve to be in a position where I try to make them feel sympathetic for me. Like, because they felt my pain, so they know on some level, but it still doesn't justify what I've done to them, what torture I put them through, kept them away from their loved ones. So I think Wanda's even acknowledging, like, yeah, I messed up and I deserve any backlash that comes after me for this. So, because we don't know what the time frame is between, like, whether it's immediately after or maybe a couple days or weeks or later when Wanda, you know, is seen in that cabin. Because what's interesting, though, is obviously with the timeline, this means Wanda ends up becoming publicly, you know, could potentially become public enemy number one before I was about to say Parker, you know, Peter does, you know, because Far From Home takes place apparently months after Endgame. I like I said, I talked about it recently. I didn't remember that, but to be fair, I haven't seen Far From Home since it was in theaters back in 2019, you know, so it could be, that could be true. Like I said, I just don't remember it, but so I just think that's kind of interesting. Once again, you know, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, this could be something they definitely lean into more. We could like see something in Doctor Strange too. Once again, that's just because we know for sure that's potentially the next time we see Wanda. We could see her in like a post credits to a movie or a TV show going forward, for all we know, because I get the feeling like maybe some of this stuff might tie into Loki. Highly doubt it will tie into Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but maybe Loki, the Eternals, maybe not. I think because the Eternals were supposed to come out before this, right? Because Falcon and the Winter Soldier were supposed to be the first show to come out. I don't remember the original scheduling and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of stuff has been moving around, but I think next time we see her might be the next movie that pops up before Doctor Strange. Whether that might be Spider-Man, which might have ties to the multiverse, so there might be some Wanda stuff sprinkled in there, whether she actually pops up herself, because at that point, if she's potentially on the run and Peter's on the run, like, there might be some commonality of, hey, we don't really know each other that well, but hey, you're an Avenger, I'm an Avenger. Maybe they'll go down that route, maybe they won't even touch on it at all. But like I said, it could be like a post-credits thing. We'll kind of have to wait and see, especially because potentially Doctor Strange is tied into that, like he is, you know, obviously tied in this, so that could be another bridge connecting WandaVision to Doctor Strange. Could be the third Spider-Man movie, No Way Home. Like I brought it up, I think it's so fascinating that it's like, where things currently stand, it doesn't seem like there's an overt problem at the end, like everything was kind of cleared up. That doesn't mean that won't potentially change in between, you know, then and there. Or maybe, like I said, at the top of Multiverse of Madness, like Wanda's situation is what kickstarts the entire problem in the movie. Like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Obviously, these are just some of my thoughts, some of the things going through my head. I'd love to get to know yours in the comments down below. Do you agree with anything I brought up? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts. Really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, all light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.